All 26 fossil Pokemon, the whole lot of them are getting ranked. Terrifying ancient creatures of the past. You just know something big had to have kicked off to get rid of these 26 weapons lurking Pokemon's planet millions of years ago. That meteor to wipe these out must have been one thick Deoxys. I thought there'd be more than 26, but that's a fair number when you think about it. These Pokemon scientists are playing a dangerous game, even risking reviving these fossils. Who knows what awaits for them on the other side of that pebble. You'd think after conjuring up a Kabuto for the first time, you'd think they would have packed up their studies for good, had every single fossil they'd found donated to feed a homeless graveler this Christmas. So for now, we'll just make do with ranking all 26 known fossilized Pokemon. Canonical crossbreeding in Pokemon. A more underrated and subtle showcase of the creators having done their research for basing a region on the UK. All the Galafossil scientists needed was the caravan to be completely lore accurate. You already find the guy in a campsite. His house, he must have it parked up somewhere else. Might be getting his MOT sorted, who knows. But what freakish monstrosities crossbreeding has spawned up for us. One conversation with this little nerd and his primordial goo jar out in the desert, and here you've conjured up something that could only be the result of taboo alchemy. Dracozolt looks like you paid an arm and a leg to the void as punishment for conjuring. The other one though, your whole body's getting confiscated. You're the Alphons here. This shouldn't ever exist, let alone exist for the sole purpose of cockfighting. Whatever that is meant to be, only battles with the hopes of it being its last. Refuses the Poké Center treatment every time for prolonging its hellish lifespan. Eventually, it'll get the sweet embrace of death it wants when it inevitably becomes extinct for a second or third time. If the inability to eat won't do it in, the sleep apnea will. Breathing problems alone will make sure it's not floating about too long. This thing simultaneously exists in the same two categories of that homunculus that Russian guy bashed in with a Bible and a pug. And Dracovish isn't only genetically botched, the brain's got something lacking there and all. Maybe all that blood is rushing the wrong way from its head being attached the wrong way. But if it can't eat because its mouth is on backwards, it can only move underwater anyway, right? So why not just swim horizontally? It'd be better to have your body on backwards and actually be up straight to eat your dinner properly, you'd imagine. Like if you're underwater, you just exist however you want. Straight into Dracozolt, because it isn't that much better. Actually, it's quite a lot better, but you know, still second last. Constant state of hypothermia and never-ending cycle of shivering to generate electricity for itself. In an evolutionary sense, Dracozolt looks like an ironic circumstance the Ice Age squirrel would find themselves in. Now being frozen in the shape of an acorn with none of the evolutionary tools available for him to consume it during the weigh-ins, losing the reach advantage to a nut. Hand's got about 3 knuckles worth of reach. Only method of eating is Maltesers being thrown up, which he can only hope land in the mouth. Someone needs to give him a necklace with a bowl attached to it. At the very least, the guy is armed with a shelf, 150 kg and all. If Dracozolt falls, it's going extinct again. I don't think evolution planned on something like this ever existing. It doesn't exactly have the facilities to be doing push-ups with 330 pounds of wedge behind him. From the looks of him, it doesn't even have the hands to wipe its own nose. Someone spot your man a tissue. Needs some kind of living assistance installed by the NHS. Get him a toy grabber at minimum, and then a spare claw grabber to grab the first grabber in case he drops it. But if he drops both of them, you know, there's not much we can do about that then. I think it's too far gone for assisted living. Don't think even private healthcare is gonna sort you out a wheelchair that lets you levitate like Dr. Eggman. Only way it's surviving is if it gets led around like he's Andre the Giant coming down the ring at WrestleMania. Needs a permanent mobile box to be encased in. All things considered, there's at least 2 more fossil Pokemon they're keeping secret from us that would have been far worse than these two. Because you'd be naive to believe that these Pokemon scientists weren't experimenting outside the lines of the fossil combination grid. Those little Poindexters were definitely throwing together every possible combination, skimming fossils along the primordial goo just to see what would spawn. For the pursuit of science, there's no chance you're convincing me Galarian eggheads had too much of a moral high ground to be double dipping the Bionicles. They were definitely chucking them all together to form the improvised Megazord Sword Bionicle. Morality was not a factor here. They weren't holding the Drake and Dino fossils, trying to wedge them into each other like, oh nah, these are two leg pieces. Don't fit together, do they? You'd be battling a trainer who can't get his Zolt to listen to him because they're both arguing at each other like cat dog. You'd definitely have been seeing the lower half of Dracozolt and Archeops fuse together and getting topped up by the government quickly. Them Machamps in black suits and shades sprinting down the desert outside Area 51, chasing after the product of two Drake fossils being fused together, legging it towards freedom like SpongeBob with the new boots on his head and body. Sheldon is said to be outstandingly armored. It can eat grass and berries without having to fight. Yeah, well, am I supposed to be impressed? Am I being detained, Sheldon? I can eat grass and berries all day long without having to fight as well. Most of the time I don't. In my boxers, no less, watching 3-hour-long video essays about the Big Mama's House trilogy. Outstandingly armored. Imagine being the type of guy who'd crouch down, start rubbing Sheldon's head and saying to himself, outstanding. Unless it's David Attenborough himself updating the Pokedex, you don't get to say that without sounding a bit pinkies out. You live a very cushy life if you were a guy who could look at Sheldon and think, outstanding. I'm actually jealous. I wish I could be made so happy by something like this. You're living in a different world to most people. You see a 4 out of 10 Pokemon and the first word that comes to your head is the first word people read when they can't pay off their electricity. Well, its armor isn't outstanding enough to shield it from my judgment. As a standard Pokemon, it's already nothing to me really. So as a fossil Pokemon, it's very underwhelming. I understand. It's an investment talent. No one is there for the Sheldon, you want the Bastiodon. So on its own, it's just not competing in the rankings, really. Few enemies would have been willing to square off against its heavily armored face. I feel like you've got to adjust for inflation, the abilities these old Pokemon had. Maybe Sheldon was untested back when the only types that existed were near enough gravel and insect. That shield wouldn't be lasting with the talent we have today. Give a wild Crabrawler on the street a spare Siggy and he'd have that shield cracked in one bang. Give a Grapploct a key in the toilets and he'd have a pair of them in rear naked choke split open like he's doing the watermelon challenge. It's probably not even worth the revival. Not worth the day out to the museum, really. May as well hand the fossil off to the daycare center and come back when it's a Bastiodon. I don't think my stance has strayed too far off the menu for Mega Aerodactyl. Just got the Turkish Golem treatment. This Mega Evolution should have been the opportunity to make Aerodactyl look more primordial, but done properly. It should have been the ancient past paradox of Aerodactyl. In its prime, on the prowl for some Omastars to knock over on their side, taking bets with the boys on how long it takes for them to stand up again. Power of Mega Evolution has completely restored the genes. So yeah, it is meant to be a peak performance Aerodactyl. I feel like the scientists who sorted out its fossil did your man a favor, gave that old Amber a clean shave, sorted Aerodactyl out with the short back and sides. I think I said something like this before, but even if they just changed the color of it, give it that Jurassic era filter, make it look a bit volcanic or something, then it could have been salvaged a fair bit maybe. I can't explain why at all. But the little goatee, its big jaw gape, and his face being all long, it just makes me think Waluigi got animorphed. With the fossil Pokemon, you could make a case for any being your favorite really, and I fully get why Armaldo might be one of your top fossils, but for me, it's gonna have to be the martyr for this list, to bear the cross as this video's way of farming all the I'll take comments, which I don't mean to do it. I'm not going out of my way to hate your favorite Pokemon. I don't even hate Armaldo. I just don't know the guy too well. He seems okay, but okay isn't really good enough. So like 5th last place ye go. I do get it though. It's on the champions team. It's rare by default being a fossil and no other Pokemon does or ever will look like this again. It's just, don't know how to be nice about it. It really shows. You can definitely tell your man was made from a rock. Might even be a piece of rubber or something. I don't know. Fossil got dented after a UPS driver chucked it over the fence, and now it has a set of eyes like a pair of rear view mirrors. Them big beautiful eyes flapping around the place. Walking the streets a strong breeze away from having the vision of a goldfish. Down the Devon Corporation, they must have had the university students man this fossil. They must have been working on the assignment after a heavy bender on the sesh down Rustboro City, because they've somehow given the fossil fetal alcohol syndrome. How unique of a creature that not only could chew on its own eyeballs, but looks smooth-brained enough to actually commit to it. Archeops reminds me of the Ice Age squirrel getting frozen over, but Armaldo is just Sid. I know that has to be the most blatant observation you can make about the thing, but even growing up, Armaldo just seemed a bit off to me. See, I liked Sid as a kid. I think he was probably sound enough for me. He's no donkey, but he's a perfectly serviceable comic relief goon. I just don't think it's the kind of energy I'd personally want to be getting from something that's meant to be a horrifying shrimp creature. Why does Hoen's most dangerous man host a creature with the same dimensions as Ed? Actually, no, that's a genius move. Ed with a stone stuck in his shoe with low diff on Armaldo. Most wild Pokemon even. All in all, not a bad Pokemon overall, but I'm not too bothered about it as one of the fossils though. I think it looks too friendly. I think it should have gone more in on becoming a freakish shrimpoid. Bastiodon, a tale as old as time, the King Bob-omb archetype, invincible up front, but very susceptible to back shots. That's where the steel and rock typing split comes into play. Look boys, remember, I'm a rock type at the back, so watch it. The face of a Metagross, the back end of a Geodude. I only have one ground rule. You can slap me in the face all you want, swing a baseball bat or two if you're curious, but spanking is strictly off limits. It's like fighting Defense Deoxys if the back half of him was still stuck to the meteor. But as fitting for a Pokemon past its time, it just seems like a logistically inefficient Lairon. If you're talking just about its physical dimensions, it's not far off a Lairon working on the side, dancing about across the road dressed like a Domino's pizza box. At least 80% of that weight has to be from Mother Nature sentencing it to a lifetime in the iron waffle. I could see this one going extinct purely from its center of gravity being so dodgy, like a Kingler and its wham claw tilting it to one side. If a Bastiodon gets flipped over forehead first, has all that weight at the bottom, just take the coward's way out and respawn at that point, or it's gonna have to make do existing like an indoor Diglett, plant-potted Diglett. I get a lot of people love the Sinnoh ones. It's an interesting fossil Pokemon, but it's another case where I just prefer the other fossils a lot more. The classic unbreakable forehead versus the unstoppable forehead, a creature named after the word cranium, and it's maybe the first ever canonically smooth-brained Pokemon. Even has the Joe Rogan enlarged TRT skull to encase it in. I'm on a similar wavelength for these boys as I am Bastiodon, both in the fossil sector of dinosaur, caveman-like creatures, the kind to be devouring bones without chewing like they're on the clock, as if that diesel looking bulldog from Tom and Jerry is about to spin their jaw for it. I feel like owning a Bastiodon would be like owning a bulkier, less efficient Lairon. Then you evolve that and you arguably get a more efficient Rampardos with Aggron. Because I thought I liked Rampardos more than I realized, until I used one playing through the Sinnoh remakes, and the guy's moveset, it just isn't all there. Felt like it had a built-in 70% accuracy on every move it tries. It's not just a headbutton Pokemon, it's the headbutt Pokemon, T-Rex proportioned, and is more likely to hit you with his hands. Playing through the Sinnoh remakes, you could convince me Rampardos would miss the headbutt you'd need to land on a tree to find Heracross. Got that rigged Pokemon Stadium 2 rental accuracy, but I've got to respect it. If anything, is very on brand for Pokemon's first ever documented smooth brain. In my experience, the move accuracy is making me feel like the Pokedex is downplaying how stupid it is. It should read Rampardos, the minuscule mind Pokemon, like putting your chewing gum in the center of a basketball. But the fact its walnut brain can even comprehend a psychic type move like Zen Headbutt to begin with, it's surely a spectacle to science already. Being able to land the move, now that's just asking him with too much. I know Anorith is meant to be a terrifying extinct shrimp, but how could you not love the wee fella? I know, like its unfortunate 2 passing grades out of school maximum looking evolution, Anorith's eyes are lopsided too. If anything, that's too much eye. Omnidirectional eye, like a 360-degree camera, and he's got a pair of them. Anorith's eyes could look at each other and wave. How would that even look from its perspective? It fries my brain to think about your 2 eyes facing out staring at each other. Well, am I overthinking it? Would it be like staring into 2 opposite portals? As if both of your eyes are looking into a mirror at the same time. Whatever it looked like, clearly nothing gets past him. Obviously this species would go extinct. It's evolving the other way around. It evolved into having a pair of rear view mirrors when it originally never even had a blind spot. But its eyes are dopey looking in a more endearing way. He's like Migi from Parasite. Adorable and freakish. A direct ancestor of that which is all but just a little freak, the old shrimp Pokemon. It'd make for an adorable small pet. In theory, at least. Practically speaking, if this had the Detective Pikachu real life movie filter on and was sitting in my living room, I'd be chucking the hardest thing I could find at my desk straight at it. The YouTube plaque would be getting used like a pie to the face. But that's kind of what I wanted from Armaldo. For it to be a freakish shrimpoid-like creature, right? But that's why I think I like Anorith a bit more. It's simultaneously like a lovable pet that also happens to terrify me. It's like adopting a Rescue XL bully that was raised 7 years in a council estate. The fabled choice, Omanyte or Kabuto, El Clasico. Always been in favor of the Kabuto, but I think that's just residue from my 8-year-old brain. I would have chosen that because it becomes Kabutops, and Kabutops looks edgier, and I just haven't questioned myself to have ever considered the Helix fossil. Like, as a kid, you're more drawn to the coolio Pokemon. Kabutops has knife hands, he doesn't smile, and he probably listens to Breaking Benjamin too. When you're a kid, you want the Pokemon you'd think a main character would use. Yeah, well, as an adult, I want to use the freaky starfish who looks like he keeps the word cowabunga in rotation, and he probably listens to Chili Peppers too. My tastes may have changed, but that doesn't change the fact that Kabutops is menacing and is indeed a menace. Kabutops is like humanity's biggest fear about 90% of the ocean being unexplored. It's thought this came onto land because its prey adapted to life on land. That's what us humans ended up doing eventually. Maybe they're playing the long game, waiting to emerge for us. That's what I like about the Kabu boys. I think they both have a very strong primal aura surrounding them, a lot more than the other fossils. Like, they're not fun. They're not for Pokepark walks or sharing Subway mega melts with. They're built for procuring sustenance and survival. But maybe we're a bit too quick to be judging Kabutops, the murderous, blood-absorbing horseshoe crab. Turns out it's a bit of a man of the people, a true Robin Hood of sustenance. Splices its prey apart for the fluids and leaves about the discarded parts as a bit of tidy scran for any other Pokemon. Out of all fossil Pokemon, this may be the one case where the pre-evolution is scarier, and that's saying a lot when it goes on to become a scythed sea scorpion. Kabuto is a terrifying little goon. It looks like the reason why you have to get like 7 vaccinations before traveling across the world. I think something gets lost along the way transitioning this little Metroid creature into this malnourished scyther. I think Kabutops should have inherited the mystery that Kabuto's design brings. Obviously, the guy's a bit difficult to hide post-evolution. You can't leave much of that design as an enigma anymore. He's got pectorals now. He went from only having long fingernails to functioning kneecaps. That physical change happening so suddenly is a big adjustment to adapt to. It's like a worm suddenly getting the body of a Megatron action figure. But at the bare minimum, I think they should have kept the red eyes. As I've gotten older, my taste more refined. I just love a solid weirdo. A complete freakzilla of a Pokemon. The real unique ones. You're never getting another Omastar. Maturin is moving past the Kabutops and its edgy scythes for hands and opting for the party animal Omastar. Look at him waving about his little tentacles. This lot went extinct because they were too heavy to hunt, so the guy's just locked in. Omastar is in a perpetual state of requesting uppies. A request I would greatly consider, as long as it were in the Omanyte form. You take one look at that wee man and tell me it wouldn't make for one loyal pet snail. Hey, he's just trying to show off. Look at him. He's just trying to flex his biceps to you. Wants you to give him a little squeeze. If I could go back in time and give them one thing to save their species,
it would be an AK-47 assault rifle.
no, I'd go back in time and invent the skateboard. Wouldn't be going extinct on my watch as a pet. I'd be having my Omanyte doing kickflips in no time. So I'll rate Omanyte for being a complete wee fella, and I'll rate Omastar for being a complete freaky star fella. It's the right balance of monstrosity, and arguably scarier than the forced monstrosities of the Galafossils, because this feasibly could have existed on our planet at some point. What it's based on would have existed, I know, but I'm saying literal Omastars hobbling about our planet. You can't actually prove me wrong, can you? Tirtouga and Carracosta, a pair of fine fellows, superior on the evolutionary food chain for shell-based evolutionary losers. Tirtouga is possibly the genetic seed to what would become Blastoises, Torterras, Shuckles. But realistically, I feel like it evolved to just mong out at the Kame house with Master Roshi. Tirtouga may be the big granddaddy of all turtle Pokemon, but Carracosta is a pioneer of what we now know as the high-vis jacket. Can bend metal bars with its jaw. Now that's a grafter's skill set if I've ever seen it. Born in the wrong time, Carracosta yearns for the tradesman's life. He just looks permanently fuming that it has to exist 100 million years before the invention of carling. When I said the newer generations would be tucking in all the older fossils to bed, I didn't think that was the case on an evolutionary level. But clearly, Omanyte and Omastars didn't stand a chance. Skateboard and all, Carracosta used to roam about eating them raw. They can spam withdraw as much as they want because their shell's doing nothing. Carracosta treats the shell like a piece of lettuce. It's only there to add a bit of crunch and texture. Omastars look like they share the same diet as a scrap metal shredder, and Carracostas are eating Omastars in the same way. Just goes to show that there's levels to this game. Omastars seem horrifying, and then a big shelled lad comes over like,
Ferrero Rocher.
Omanyte species have to keep their eyes peeled on land and the sea. Not even safe in the sky, to be honest, with Archeops around. If they can manage the shaman's garden sprint needed to get up in the air, getting found with bite marks from those as well, catching heat from all terrains. Only place the Omanyte species could have an easy night's sleep is apparently on the moon. Imagine being an Omanyte lucky enough to have been revived 100 million years later, only to have ended up existing once again at the exact same time as Carracosta. This Pokemon emerges from the water in search of prey, despite the fact it moves slowly on land. The Omanyte species aren't safe anywhere. Carracosta might move slow, like caravan slow, but Omastar is slower, like wheels stolen off a caravan slower. These are simply a hard pair of sea turtles. Carracosta, being a Chava trendsetter with the body warmer, was keeping it lemon 100 million years back. In another time, that shell was a stone island. Aerodactyl, like the Rayquaza of the El Clasico fossils, one of the Gen 1 dragons that was deemed too powerful to be a dragon. You can't see a fossil like that strung up in Pewter City's museum and have some geek in a lab coat tell you that's just a flying type. Yeah, no one said it was a dragon, mate. More pterodactyl than dragon. More historical than D&D, so mostly just a rock type, really. Can it be a... Did you just say dinosaur type? That's just stupid. You're living in a make-believe world there. Highest offer, best I can do, flying type. But until you get me a nice enough stone, it's staying as a ghost type. Having that whole skeleton hung up in a museum. At some point you have to wonder just how under the table you'd have to go about reviving one of these. Back in the day, all that was known about it was goes for the enemy's throat with its fangs. You resurrect one of these, the feds are getting involved. Like, you've got Dragonites and all that around, so they could probably handle one or two. But what if they were resurrecting like Ultra Necrozma on Tren and they had no clue? How do you expect to calmly bring an Aerodactyl into the modern world too? Waking up in some tube with a 10-year-old child mouth breathing on the glass the other side, doesn't know what to do. All you both know is that it goes for the throat. These people haven't learned a single thing from Mewtwo. You're about 20 steps away from Cinnabar Mansion, like setting up a nuclear power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine. You know, statistically, Chernobyl was like what, 1 in a million? What are the odds? we lose that 1 in a million twice in a row. Even if he's a nice Aerodactyl, the culture shock would be too frightening. For what feels like a long sleep in, it's gone from the discovery of fire to being able to watch people have Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels in real time on TikTok Live.
And my wife has summoned a ham sandwich to my field.
He gets one whiff of someone's secondhand vape cloud and he turns to liquid form. Aerodactyl is clearly one of the boys who was part of the mandatory extinction. I doubt your man here was starved for Scran selections or had some kind of defect that made it so he could only feed exclusively from grass-fed Omanytes. It needed the planet to be factory reset to be tucked in for bed. Aerodactyl, vicious, cutthroat, wouldn't invite him to meet the family. You can complain all you want about newer Pokemon generation designs, but you can't be giving it large when you bring the fossils into that conversation. The more modern generations, if I can even call it that anymore, to me Gen 5 onwards is always just going to be modern. Overall, they're giving the older fossils a mean spanking. Bastiodon especially is not keen for it. It's as if they realised 5 generations in that rocks can actually come in colours that aren't only detectable by the same camera that photographed Theodore Roosevelt. Archen and Archeops are just way too vibrant to not be given some fair ratings. The ancestors of all bird Pokemon, a very broad spectrum potentially. What you see before you now was the blueprint to what you now know as Blaziken, all the way to Delibird, the bird whose brain is too smooth to fly. You see the wings there? Oh, you want me to fly? Come on, you know I'm all glamour muscle. It gets there eventually with Archeops. Yeah, that you just have to let him get a quick 25-mile-an-hour wind-up. Only takes him about 2.5 miles to accelerate. Only like half the length of Shaman's Garden. Guy has to dead sprint what might as well be hatching a 5-kilometer Pokemon Go egg every time it wants to take flight. Honestly, at that point, just leave it. Just let you win, okay? I believe you. I bet you could fly, alright? Just drop it. I love how stupidly built these two are. It runs and jumps better than it flies. Maybe this is the compromise this species had to deal with to end up being the preset for all birds. You know, they had to have a bit of everything to eventually become every bird. Lower half Blaziken, top half unpheasant. Another attempt at someone taking Infinite Fusion into their own hands. It's a miracle this thing is even alive, let alone making the draft Thrasher's champion team. Honestly, disqualify him. Right now, strip him of the title. Oak and the rest of the professors should shun him for this abomination to science. That's probably what me years back would have said, but his mutant has me all warmed up to it these days. And I'm not glory hunting just because Ash won the league with one of them, because I've not followed the anime since Pokemon Troze came out. Ash Ketchum could single-handedly win World War III, and in my eyes, he will always be that same jabroni that got punked out by a fresh-out-the-egg Snivy. I feel like Dracovish just shouldn't work. The guy should be scrounging off universal credit, but somehow, this fella's definitely working. It's like when you're rummaging an empty kitchen for some easy hangover sustenance, and you throw together like super noodles, those 3 Yorkshire puddings that have been starving in the freezer since Christmas last year. Topped it off with McCoy's flame grilled steak and drenched a lot of it with expired Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. And whatever you've made somehow ends up changing the game for hangover scran. Dracovish is when you're getting desperate. The last resort drinks. All that's left at the house party is Tesco economy vodka and bar cream soda, but you mix the two together, take one sip, and now you got 20/20 vision. Shouldn't work, but absolutely does. That's exactly what Dracovish is. That Tesco vodka cream soda thing, I wouldn't be placing bets on that one working. I'd actually think you go blind mixing them. The colors make this one stand out a lot in a group of rocks. Dracovish is something that never should have been cooked to begin with, yet it's making most of the other fossils look like they could do with a bit more time in the air fryer. Kalos was kicking off with the fossils they excavated. Gen 6, hardest prehistoric lineup going, and it's not even debatable. Amaura and Aurorus, those fossils are kept at the top shelf. They do just be chilling.
Negative 240 degrees Fahrenheit.
Kinda chilling. They're not where the action is. They're not with the smooth brains in the jungles making their own prehistoric Premier League, kicking Omanytes about as footballs to keep themselves entertained until the inevitable Fat Deoxys lands and takes them all out with him. They stay safe in their little fridge world where they live without the fear of having their heads caved in by a beefy turtle's jaw. You'd think these two would have got the pass from an ice age happening, extinction-wise. Maybe the entire species as a collective fell victim to each specifically getting crushed by the meteor. Did an ice age happen in Pokemon's world? Did a meteor hit the planet? This old man in the museum was waffling on to me about the moon landing happening July 20th, 1969. So I assume other aspects of Pokemon history have to match up to ours. But how far can we say? First, it's the moon landing. Second, it's Pokemon having its own Battle of Stalingrad. Two prize specimens, Aurora Borealis sauropods. At this time of year, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen. Quite depressing, actually, if they were localized entirely in Principal Skinner's kitchen, because they just melt. They're not expected to live long because of the heat of the current environment. But I don't think that's any excuse. You could at least make the effort. You could take the initiative, alright? You could maintain them, chuck them in a cave full of Glalie to keep them frosty. Then again, they've developed Pokeball technology, something we could never hope to achieve, yet landed on the moon the exact day we managed to, so, you know, easy come, easy go. When it comes to playing God and all of that stuff, with Dracozolt, they were cooking something there. They played God and won. This is the perfect compromise of freakish and prehistoric. Big chubby wubby gamer goddess on the back and just a weeman on the front. This size imbalance is like fusing Rasputia Lattimore from the hit movie Norbit and Norbit from the hit movie Norbit. It kicks your whole cave down with the 400-pound back end, and when everyone goes after him, he quickly flips around to the front side like,
Whoa, I'm just a little guy. I'm just a little guy. Come on, you wouldn't hurt the little guy.
the colors, the size imbalance, it should all feel so wrong, but it bangs so right. This goes to show the fossilized Drake is the main player here. Scientists, archaeologists, whoever better be working on the daily trying to find that top half. What do you mean you found 500 Drake pieces and every single one of them is fossilized Bunda? Tyrantrum, what an alpha specimen. You see, like an Omastar, you don't question how it got wiped out. Tyrantrums are the ones where you're like, oh, okay, now I'm understanding. Now I see why they had to hire Sephiroth to wipe you lot out. If Carracostas are munching Omastars and no-selling how sharp the spikes are, think what I was saying, there's levels to this. Tyrantrum is then consuming Carracostas in the same manner. To be honest, I even reckon as a child in its Tyrant days, it'd still be taking on the more weaker Carracostas. But sadly, they specifically prey on Amauras, not even the fully grown Auroras. They're a bit crafty about it. They go for the younglings who haven't learned any good ice-type stab moves yet. Tyrantrum, that's enough now. Come eat Omastars like the rest of us. But really, they're gonna eat whatever that jaw craves. The kingpin of ancient times, seen as invincible, has the jaw strength to crush cars into cubes. Not that it would ever come into contact with one. About 100 million years off. About as likely as Carracosta getting his Carlin. But you never know. Just in case a loud courser happens to be waking up the jungle at 2 AM, he's armed for the job. It's not completely restored. Implied to have had a feather-like coat. So I think it's implying the whole like, dinosaurs are actually now chickens. That thing you'd see as a interesting factoid one might ponder on Facebook in like 2011. You're saying the invincible kingpin, tyrant of the prehistoric world, might have been an 8-foot-tall dragon chicken. Take my Reddit gold immediately, kind stranger. A perfect summary of how grateful I am to be living in the times we do and as a human, instead of being a semi-sentient houseplant of a creature 4 billion years ago, having to hang around Lileep and Cradily waiting to fulfill my life's vocation to be devoured. My favorite fossil lineage, the Lileep and Cradily family, based on predatory ghost fish, traps animals inside until they get digested. An ambush predator! I get it for Cradily, but it's quite the description for Lileep. He just looks like a freaky little fella out of Zelda Minish Cap. But Cradily, fair game. If anything, that description undersells the horror. They didn't pull a Kabutops and lose the horror aspect here. It only gets more terrifying. You have the mystique of Lileep's eyes and what its face could be in the darkness, just like Kabuto had, but this time they keep that and even expand on it with Cradyly's, I guess you could call them, glamour muscle eyes. The tentacles extend 3 times the size, gives you a big old grab, digests you alive with the tentacle acid before it's even consumed you. Get you nice and juicy before consuming whatever goo is left of you. That's what I'm all about with these two. Such a one-of-a-kind Pokémon. They're just so unique. Unique to look at. Uniquely frightening.